belter of an episode for you today. I'm super delighted to say that we've got Dara Nasr on the show today. Welcome, Dara. Dara is VP of Global Sales for WeTransfer, probably until recently more famously known as MD of Twitter in the UK. Worked at Twitter for 10 years.
The word, it was like a roller coaster. Very true. But in truth, there were far more downs than there were ups.
Prior to that, at Google for 6 years and involved in YouTube in the early days. You said recently that advertising needs to get back to fun and creativity and positive mindset. Today, we're going to hear about Dara's journey, his learnings, his advice. As I said, you're in for a belter, so welcome again, Dara.
Dara, so cool to have you on. Let's kick off. We're coming to the end of 2024. My God, the year has flown by. What are some of your reflections? How's it been for you?
Oh, whirlwind, to be honest. I think, we say that every year, don't we? This seems to fly by, but it really, really did. As Mark said at the top, I started a new job right at the beginning of the year. And that's been really, really exciting. Getting to work with, new people and a new product globally. It's been a lot of travel, but yeah, it's been really interesting year, a lot of learning. But yeah, as you said, it has been a whirlwind. I think, what I've seen working, from what I'm hoping anyway, from a macro level, things seem to be, I might be wrong here, but seem to be calming slightly. There are obviously elections across the world this year. Probably most recently, most notably in the US, but they're in France, in the UK. I suppose it's quite rare that happens across the world, but I think working in advertising media as I do, it does make a big impact. So yeah, hopefully things settling slightly. But yeah, it's been a whirlwind, been great. A lot of learning, a lot of speaking to people like Mark, which has been super fun, but really, insightful as well. Yeah, it's great.
So Dara, when we were talking about you coming on the show, what really sealed it for me was you told a bit of a story about a moment in your past and which stirred all kinds of emotions in me. So I'm going to jump straight in and ask you to tell us that story.
So I was born, this might surprise your viewers or listeners, but my name doesn't come from the UK. And I was actually born in Iran. And like a lot of people of my generation, I was kind of like a child of the Iranian Revolution. So my parents left in 1980. And we came to the UK. We came to the UK because actually my mother was a breadwinner in our family. She worked in consulting in Iran. She got offered a job by British Airways to come over. And actually, she was the first ever woman hired by British Airways in a management position and the youngest ever manager at the time. So, we came over. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time. I was like 4. Oh, no, I none of it. But anyway, so we came over and lived in London for 6 months. But British Airways, they're HQ'd unsurprisingly near Heathrow. So, we actually, all they said to my mum is, if you want to choose somewhere near the M4, which is like near Heathrow. So she found this town that she really liked called Marlow, which is pretty famous. Everyone in kind of the southeast kind of knows it now. But it was a sleepy little town on the river, but really beautiful. And we moved there in 1980. So I joined the local school up the road, and my mum and dad went to see the headmaster and said, they were paranoid that my level of English, I've been in England for 6 months, wouldn't be good enough for like schooling. So they said to him, look, if his English isn't good enough, let us know and we'll sort tuition or we'll come up with a solution with you or whatever. I said, yeah, no worries, we'll have a look. And then a week later, they called them back in. He called them back in, the headmaster, and my parents went in. And my parents didn't actually have faith in me that I'd watched 6 months of television in London, basically, and done very little else. And I'd essentially become fluent in English, but she didn't really realize that. But the headmaster said, look, he's absolutely fine. If anything, he's better than some of the other kids, because I started school in London, etc., all good. Anyway, my parents relieved, stopped walking out, and the headmaster said in a very kind of, reassuring way, don't worry, Mr. and Mrs. Nasr, we're used to teaching foreign children. In fact, there's another foreign child in Dara's year. And my mum went, oh, really? Where's he or she from? And the headmaster said, Wales. And it wasn't a joke. I mean, and obviously I can tell it and it sounds like a joke, but it wasn't a joke. And what very much defined what my mother and father were like. My mother was really worried about that, and my dad thought it was hilarious. So yeah, and the reason, I said, I mean, it's an interesting story, but the reason I think, it kind of, Mark and I speaking about it, is I've always felt relatively fortunate, because yes, that is true. I was the only foreign kid, or the non-English or Welsh kid at that school, or certainly in that year. But I was only like 4 or 5, and so whilst I was considered different, by the other kids, and people found it interesting, that was it. It was just interest, and I was very much positively celebrated. Like, oh, well, can you do this, or what does your name mean, or what do you do? There was no, didn't have much like negativity. Now, and I think that's important to me, because as I'm very lucky that when I got older a few years ago, I was asked to join media, or MEFA, Media for All, and I'm kind of like on the founding board, and we'd go around this table on our first meeting, talk about our experiences of, being brought up from a different background in maybe communities when there weren't, and there's a lot of stories that were like really sad and really tragic, and I have to say that, mine, if you were to ask me, have I ever experienced, what someone might refer to as saying, racism, name calling, whatever? Yeah, I have. However, I've been very lucky that I've always been celebrated as well, and I've always found that at school, that, I felt, for me, the journey, what I think my role in this whole diversity, inclusion, equality and inclusion story is, if people can feel as positive as I felt, as that 4 or 5-year-old, I think it's, really, really beneficial. Yeah, there's always going to be stuff that goes on that is not great. It's not great for anyone of any background, size, color, etc. But people being interested in me, but in a positive way, for being different rather than a negative way. So that I know it's weird, but I try to hold that 5-year-old, me and the Welsh kid being the outliers, as the thing. But yeah, I think that's really resonated with me, and yeah, and that's it really. And I think that's why Mark and I got chatting.
I tell you what, Dara, it's so refreshing to hear the positive flip side of these stories here, and actually testament to you that you've been able to take that 5-year-old self, hold it close to you, close to the chest, and then forge ahead in some of those organizations that you've been in and certainly led. I mean, it really is. It's quite a feat to have achieved. But I think what people tend to forget is we always think about this notion of, when you're looking for a job interview or trying to get in somewhere, we often say, but how do you stand out? How do you create differentiation for yourself? And I think what you've done is you've turned your ethnicity into a bit of a superpower there, to be able to actually stand out and be a bit different. And let's wonder if there's any further reflection on that, as if people listening in, thinking about, well, they may not have, everyone has different cards. So in a more generic way, I mean, how would you try and get people to stand out in order to forge a successful career?
I think it's a great question. And also, look, one thing I'm very conscious when I tell that story, or tell, people of how I feel, I don't want in any way to belittle other people's experiences. They might have had really negative experiences. And also, look, I'm going to be honest with you, I felt I've come from a very privileged background, so I've had, and so, but the reason I think I latch onto that is it's just helped me. I think that positivity has really helped me. And to your question, Richie, is that, and also, look, I don't think when I was 5, I was going around thinking, right, guess what? Yeah, 10, 20 years, I'm going to go around, I'm going to remember this, I'm the champion. At 5, I was like, I don't know what this bloke's talking about, but I think I very much remember, the osmosis, the whole kind of how I think back to it, and the reason I think there have been certain things in my life, epiphanies, that's too kind of grandiose, but moments that stick out, that being one of them, around the difference. But another thing was around, I realized very early in my career, I joined a company when I first started in TV. I was in TV advertising sales, this company which was called FlexTech Television. It later became IDS, then became part of Virgin, which then went into Sky, etc., etc. But I left before those days. But it was magnificent. It was such a magnificent place to start. Almost, I was again really privileged and lucky to have that opportunity. The reason it was magnificent was they were tiny. They were 2% of the overall TV ad revenue in the day. When I left 6 years later, it was about 6%. Now, I'd love to take credit for that, but I was a junior. I was like, I wasn't nobody, but Mark knows, obviously, and Richie, that growth in the TV thing is relatively impressive when you're dealing with the same kind of channel mix by and large. And the reason that they had that was their ethos was all about learning, winning together, losing together, and actually vulnerability. I'm talking like 20 plus years ago. Vulnerability then, I think, was broadly seen as a weakness. You didn't want to ask for help because that meant you couldn't do what you were doing. Being vulnerable was what? What do you mean vulnerable? Whereas now it's kind of like, it's thank God you're being encouraged to ask for help. So then IDS or FlexTech were doing that. We won together, we lost together. If we went and did a pitch or went to an agency or saw a client and we won a brief, got a brief, won a pitch or whatever, people were celebrated. But similarly, if we didn't, we're like, fine, well, why didn't we win? Let's learn. Doesn't matter that we did, but how can we prevent that happening? And when we'd interview people from, who wanted to join from other sales houses or agencies, they didn't know as much about our channels because they didn't do the revision on it, but we knew everything about our competition because we just needed to, do that. And it kind of, that taught me something at the time, which coupled with when I first started, and it was very much you join as like a grad and then you go up this ladder and it's like literally like linear, as you know. And I remember there were a few of us, there was a few positions opened up above us and there was kind of a few too many applicants, at the grad level. But all of us grads were kind of, sales assistants, whatever, we're all friends. And we'd be talking about, what are you going to do in the interview? What are you going to learn here? I remember I'd go home and it'd be like a maelstrom of like stress. My head was just like, I felt like a wasp in a bottle, going. So, and I just had this moment when I just thought, look, let's not worry about trying to be as good or the same as some of my peers and friends. I just want to do I don't mean just do the best I can, but be the best version of myself that I can. And just all I focused on what I could do and not worried about what they could do. However, it's easy to say that. I mean, we get told as kids, when you walk out of an exam, your parents say, but did you try your hardest? Or did you do? But it's almost like a throwaway statement. But this is, okay, fine. I knew what I was good at. I knew what I could do. And I really went down that route. And, I got that job and some of the other people didn't. And it really stuck with me that there's a lot that I can do that other people can't do as well as, but similarly the other way. And, I can always work with other people that can, make up for, or, complement my skills, etc. And I felt that throughout my career. When I was at Google, they had a very specific type of employee. At the time when I joined, they had similar backgrounds. A lot of them were from consulting. And I spoke to a guy there who was a friend, but he was more senior than me, kind of like an unofficial, he was like unofficial mentor for a while. And I said, look, how could I be more like John or Janet or, whatever, I need to do this. And he said, are you mad? Just be you. Other people want to be like you. But just focus on being you and do that and just develop that. And that goes back to that 5-year-old, right? Is that everyone's different. Everyone's brilliant in their own ways. If I focus on, look, I'll be perfectly honest. I knew Mark from back in the day when I was, Twitter and stuff. I knew of him and he was always celebrated as an incredible person.
I'm hoping he hasn't disappointed.
No, his work was always rightly celebrated as being best in class. But it's been a real privilege to get to know him in the last year. And he tells us these kind of academic theories. I'm in this thing like in awe. Oh my God. and it's so great. I think one of them was called this Benjamin Franklin thing he told us about, which I really, really liked. And he's got about 1 million of these things that he knows about. And he's like, and I leave these sessions with him feeling so inspired and so like, I don't know, oddly like enthused about stuff and just cleverer. I think I just feel cleverer. However, I'm not like, I can't do that as well as him, but brilliant. I don't care. It doesn't matter because I get the privilege of being around him. And I dare say there might be stuff that I do that he couldn't do as well. So I think celebrating that difference and your own difference is the best thing. You know, this, you know, if we're going, oh, sorry, I'm rambling. If you're getting headlong into a world of AI, you know, human differentiation is paramount, right? So,
dude, I would totally high five you right now. I'm so great. Honestly, man, like 100%.
Celebrate your difference. By the way, Dara, absolutely, the feeling is mutual. And we had Natalie on the show a few months back, and it's her genius to get people of very different backgrounds and contexts and thinking and careers into this melting pot to help to fuel her business. Now, you talked about winning and losing together and vulnerability. That massively chimes with me because team sports was my thing, rugby particularly, and that's all about winning and losing together. And so my question is, fast forward today, what is you at your most vulnerable best as a leader?
I was there for 10 years, and it was, you know, the word, it was like a roller coaster, which obviously gets bandied around. It's very true. But in truth, there were far more downs than there were ups. And that's not to say I didn't love it. I absolutely loved it. But we started, and then everyone thought it was going to be like the next Google or Facebook, and then clearly that wasn't the case. And then, you know, without banging on about it, there's always, you know, you read about the stuff in the press, and then you're dealing with that. And so my first instance, I was running the sales team, so obviously the revenue was an issue. Then when I was the MD, there were other stuff like in the papers that were an issue. But the people there from top to bottom, and I really do think, you know, without going to, I think a lot of culture is set at the top. And, you know, when I've heard stories about that Mark said about Mars and how they set certain things up about development, it's obviously from top down. And the people at Twitter, the management, everyone really cared. They really cared about their employees, and they really valued them. And I don't mean, oh, they just threw money at them, because that's not the case. It's their opinions. They valued their opinions. They weren't, and that meant a huge amount. And it really was a winning together, losing together thing. If you had their trust, if you had their thing, if things weren't going well, they wouldn't look to blame you. They'd look to find out and how we work together to make it better. You know, and I had a few instances where, you know, I felt things weren't going so well. So I wrote to the kind of someone in the upper echelons, and their first response wasn't to go, well, okay, listen, we'll go. They're like, okay, how have I let you down? Or what could I have done? But they meant it as they didn't read a book and thought they should say it. They meant it. And that meant a lot to me. And I think when you talk about how I've been a leader of my vulnerable best, I'm a real soppy sod. Like, I'm overly emotional. And there were so many times that we could be, so we would present, when we do like Media Week awards, we'd present, we'd go for Sales Team of the Year or something like that. And we'd present to the judges, and then the judges would leave, and then the team would come in, and then we would do it to them just to see what, you know, we're doing. And you'd see their faces and how proud they were. And I'd get visibly, I say I'm being polite, I'd be visibly emotional. I'd be crying, right? And when I'd do certain things that, you know, in big kind of like all hands that were meaningful and stuff, where you could see how much it meant to certain people, including me. And I think that I would hate it. I would absolutely hate it. You go off thinking, I'm just crying. Like, what am I doing? You know? But the people who knew me, and I've been there so long, they loved it because they could see how much I cared. But I'm not recommending that anyone does it, by the way. It is one of the worst decisions, you know, like, because it's exhausting. Secondly, you go around and go, I cried. I'm in my 40s and I'm talking about a award, you know, or just, but it was nothing to do with the award. It was about that winning together, losing together as the team. And they could see how much, you know, we had people came back from maternity. There's someone who came back from maternity, I remember, And she was worried about coming back because, like a lot of people, you've done something so significant and you're worried about having a baby. Then you go and have a baby and then you worry about leaving the baby. I mean, it's a really bizarre, if you think about it, it doesn't really make much kind of sense. She came back and then she sat there and went, oh, that's why I came back. I remember, so it's that. So I think that, I suppose that doesn't mean when I'm at my best is not when I cry, but I suppose when I'm emotionally invested, is what I should say, really.
Dara, I once heard someone say that kindness is a competitive advantage. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's what you've described there, but I think what you're suggesting is a significant amount of emotional investment into what you do is really important. And then your ability to understand others and what's important to them and be able to then bring that together, for me, is super special and quite rare, quite frankly. I think a lot of people today, when they look at their big corporate leaders and stuff, feel there's a real sense of disconnection between, what the leader thinks and the commerciality and the numbers, and it's all about the trends versus actually what people feel on the ground. And I think what you've been able to do is bridge that really nicely. And so for me, that is quite a rare skill. I don't know if it's a skill because it just comes innately to you. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's you.
You should say that. Well, it's kind of, firstly, very kind of you to say that. Look, so when you say you don't know it's a skill, I think, look, there's certain parts of it, the whole emotional thing, often you just can't control it. You can't, and it's not like a walk around crying, but, heaven forbid. I mean, it's kind of, but, I think I just do my best work when I'm emotionally invested, and when other people are as well, it works well. That doesn't mean, it's funny. I heard there was a famous, I think her name was Patty McCord. She was one of the original HR people for Netflix. And she wrote this document which got shared across Silicon Valley. And everyone loved it. People raved about it. And a lot of the stuff in this document is like unbelievable. It's brilliant, by the way. But there's one line that I really kind of took objection to, because I don't think a lot of it is just black and white. I think I think nuance is beautiful. So when you try to go for black and white, you're trying to simplify. Simplification is beautiful, but sometimes you don't want to oversimplify, right? So anyway, she said in this, when you go to work, when we're at Netflix or wherever, your team is your team. It's not your family, right? So don't consider them a family. They're your team. So that what it was saying to me is there's an emotional divide. You're compartmentalizing a team, which are in the office or on virtual screens, and a family, which is at home. But the reason I had an issue is, I spent more time with that team than I did my family. And I don't mean that because I wanted to, but if we're working 70% of the week, then do the maths. You're spending more time with this group of people. Now, I'm not saying of course they're not my family, but it's probably best to not dehumanize them, because they're also not robots. They have strengths, they have weaknesses, and if you work well together, if you work well on someone's skill, and and I think that there's something about them that they're another kind. They're a professional family of sorts, right? And it's, and I think that whilst I don't want to go down that route, I think there's something about that emotional investment that really helps, that really kind of helps you do great work. And that doesn't mean you have to go home and be, that doesn't mean you shouldn't shut off. That doesn't mean you should be checking emails or Slack or whatever every minute of every day. But, caring what you work in, being passionate about what you believe in. So I think there's something about that is important, but people can do it in their own way.
The care just shines through from you, Dara, and I love that thought nuance is beautiful. So many pearls of wisdom already. But one thing really stuck with me that you said, that at Twitter, there were more downs than ups. And I've never heard anybody say that. And we've interviewed a lot of people. People will generally say, yeah, well, there was more ups and downs. And so the resilience factor was sort of intermittent, ad hoc. But I wonder if they were really being truthful. Because as I reflect in this moment, day by day, there was more things that went wrong than went right. And you had the big wins, but in between, there were lots of not so good things. So that talks to me about, you're probably more in tune with the the reality of being resilient than many. So tell us a bit more about how you navigate through the downs and the ups.
Look, I think, by the way, when you say most people say there are more ups and downs, until I left Twitter, I believed exactly the same thing about Twitter. I'll tell you why. I loved my job and I thought it was a total and utter honor to have it. Whilst there might have been more downs than ups, in truth, it was fine. That's what my job was, right? And I knew going into it what it was. And what I mean by that is, and I think that this is true, I think Twitter's a very public company, especially then. Everyone could see what was going on. I mean, so you had to deal with a load of different things. But I think in truth, I think this is true of everyone, like you've alluded to, Mark, what you said is that when you're in a kind of corporate or even at home or whatever, if something good happens, brilliant. You celebrate it or whatever, you pat yourself on the back and then you move on to the next thing, right? When something bad happens or you're firefighting, it's far more intense. It's far more draining because, I don't know, you probably don't have that dopamine or whatever. You have to, talk about resilience. And I think that, look, in truth, and I think the reason I realized there were more downs than ups at the end is when I finished, and I was kind of like on my notice period, I thought, great, right, this is what I'm going to do. It was at the end of 2022. I thought, I'm going to watch every match in the World Cup, right? And I'm also going to go to the gym every day. And I'm also going to read loads and loads. And I'm going to do a quiz now to you two. Only one of those three things I did. Do you know which one? That's right. I watched football. That's basically the one I did. And it's not because I was being lazy. It's because I've been doing a job that was really, really intense. I was waiting for something bad to happen at all times. Whether that is, I spoke to someone when I was about, they phoned me and they said, oh, how are you going? How are you enjoying, time off? I said, great, I'm watching football. I'm watching, let's say, some game at the time. I said, I can also watch it without the fear that there's going to be a lot of kind of racism on the Twitter platform that then we have to deal with and try to, get machine learning to get better at, to take it down or moderate or do, or whatever it was. And we were doing some amazing things, but it was very difficult to do catch-all and blah, blah, blah. And my friend who phoned me said, do you realize what a weird thing that is to say? And I said, what do you mean? He said, I know you love your job, but you're obviously carrying some stress or something that your first thought is, and the good news is I don't have to worry about idiots being racist, and that's true. That's what made me think about the downs, not the ups. So yes, I did love my job. And I'm sure someone who runs, a big PLC, I mean, not that that's comparable. I'm sure someone that, runs a PLC or owns a pub or, got a car showroom or I don't know, being a teacher, a lot of teachers love their job, but it ain't easy. And I think that I don't think I'm prepared to talk. I don't think I'm equipped to talk about what makes me resilient or whatever. I really don't know. But I think your point, Mark, about caring helps, right? If you care about something, you're willing to fight, aren't you? And I think that whether that's your family, and this is again why I think nuance is beautiful, right? Because if you're at work, there might be a team and it might not be your family, but that doesn't mean you don't care about it, and I think that builds it. And if you surround yourself with people that you find inspirational and, it makes it even easier, stroke better.
Dara, you know what? As you were just describing that, there's something really struck me in my mind, that there's an inherent friction and a positive one perhaps between being able to love what you're doing, perhaps on some level believing that you are where you're meant to be, and hence why you're in that position and those shoes, and yet finding that role incredibly challenging, and perhaps even on the micro, at any moment disaster, and the constant friction that creates, as a consequence. And I don't think enough people give too much heed to that. We talk about resilience. It's almost like being able to hold those two balls up in your hands and being able to juggle them all the time in order to kind of stay with it. Because most people, if you're dealing with what you've just described in that football game or the aftermath of it, would put their hands up and go, sod this. Why do I have to deal with this kind of stuff the whole time? But yet, there's something there. There's something between the two, which I think you've done effectively. Can I just turn to your current role? And actually, what I'm really intrigued about is, how did you land it? How did you know that that's the kind of thing that you wanted? And what was the process? I'd love to get a bit of an inside scoop. And the leading part of the question is, if anybody is currently looking for a role, what are the kind of things that maybe they should be thinking about in order to land a role like you did?
When I started in my career, I was working in a time where it was kind of like a management or a training watchword that we were told, like from day one. We'd walk in, we wouldn't know how to tell the time. What's your 5-year plan? Oh, you've got to write a 5-year plan. What do you want to be doing in 5 years? And I'll be like, what are these people talking about? And one of the biggest strengths I've had, and it's obviously, and it's also probably the biggest weakness, is I'd never really made one. And whilst I wouldn't recommend anyone doing that, people should do what they're comfortable with. But had I done that, I know what I'm like. I'd probably still be doing the similar kind of thing. And the reason the fact that I didn't do that, I was quite open-minded to new things. And when I moved from TV to Google, I love TV. I absolutely love TV. Mark used to work at Mars. Who doesn't love TV? It's amazing, right? And so powerful. I loved it. So I went to Google. I was like, if I'd written a 5-year plan going, what? Search ads? What are you talking about? Oh, these massive things. Everyone watches them. Center versus M breaks. I love all this. I went to Google, but then I thought, digital is growing. These Google people seem to know what they're doing. I mean, I think, everyone globally knew that. So, I went, not that I'd say it's the biggest pivot ever, but I was open to doing stuff. And that really, really helped me. And having that point of view, and the reason I give that background is I found myself in the same boat when I left Twitter. If people said, what do you want to do? I don't know. No idea. Would you want to work this kind of company? No. And at the beginning, I found it relatively funny. And then after a couple of weeks, I thought, well, what am I going to do? I really don't know. So I went with an open mind, and I spoke to a lot of, I was very fortunate that, I had conversations with quite a few different people, and some roles were probably quite similar to the role I was at, or similar-ish, and some were adjacent to, and some were totally different. And so anyway, so the role that I ended up going for, I was very lucky to be offered that. I didn't know, I knew of the company, I used the company, I liked the company, but I didn't know about their ad business, I didn't know about their revenue business. And had I had quite a fixed view, I might have been, well, no. But, I don't know, well, mate. But actually, I go, yeah, well, I'd love to speak. I like speaking to people. I spoke to this guy, CEO, a guy called Alex, and he was brilliant. And he was ex-Google. Funny enough, he was on the product side of YouTube pretty much exactly the same years as I was on the sales side of YouTube. He was talking about tools they had built that we had used. And I was like, and we had a lot of kind of synergy, alignment, whatever, serendipity, whatever the word you want to use. But more importantly than all of that, he's whip smart, he's really inspiring, and could just present a vision of what he wanted to do. And my kind of thoughts were very much aligned with his. The way they operated as a company, number one, the way they operated about themselves, and the way they respected others. So as a company, what I didn't know so much about them is that WeTransfer do a huge amount on kind of sustainability, and creativity. So they were founded by essentially people who ran creative agencies. So even to this day, they give 30% of their ad space to artists to promote their own work. They donate a huge amount of the ad revenue to a charity that supports the arts. And also, they're hugely focused around sustainability. We limit carbon footprint as much as possible. We actually share all our ad campaigns. We give advertisers and agencies. We show the carbon footprint, it's been operated and the savings we use. They've done stuff in the past where we work with AWS and we work with AWS to really reduce carbon footprint of our server usage. And I love those values, number one. Number two, the people were all I say, not just that intelligence. A lot of people are intelligent, right? A lot of people might be intelligent and you might not want to work with them. They might also not be great people, right? But these people the ones I've met and have bundles of what would traditionally be called EQ and IQ. But I think one of the other things that really stood out, and this wasn't a huge deal as the minutiae, is the respect they had for me and the other candidates in the process. When you're looking, when you're a candidate, you're waiting to hear from, the company, right, about what's going on. But if you're the company, you're dealing with probably a million different things, right? So they'll probably go, yeah, we'll give you how many times would you have heard, oh, we'll give you feedback next week or in 2 weeks, and that feedback doesn't come. And then you're sitting there going, if I chase it, do I seem desperate? If I don't chase it, do it seem like I don't care? And actually, look, I didn't think this for me. I thought this for actually all these other candidates that we had when I was at Twitter or Google before that. And it made me think I should be behaving in a way. WeTransfer, even if they had no update, would contact me and say, sorry, I know we said we'd have an update, but we've got no update, and this is why, blah, blah, thanks for this. I'd be like, cool, I wasn't expecting that. So the respect they showed for anyone they interact with, I thought was fantastic. So, and for me, a big thing, and it goes back to my first job, is that sometimes the most obvious thing might not be the best place for you. And there's a mix of stuff. So yeah, the company's got to be meaningful, but I think the people, when I've got to be, have to resonate. And when I first started that first job at FlexTech, I was very lucky to be interviewed by another company or a couple of other companies that were far more famous, that were far more, that I'd never heard of FlexTech, but I'd heard of these other companies, and I had a job offer from one of these other companies, and on paper it was exactly the same, like pretty much the same amount of money, the same amount of holiday, the same lack of benefits, whatever. And I showed my mum and dad, and they went, well, obviously you're going to go for the one that everyone's heard of, right? I went, nah, I think I'm going to go for the other one. And my mum was like rolling her eye, why? What was you doing? And I said, well, when I was being interviewed, everyone just seemed so much happier. And it was true. Like, everyone was smiling. You'd walk through the office and they're all like, they'd call something out. It was vibrant, positive, enthusiastic, and I loved it. And it wouldn't have been the obvious choice, but it's something that has to resonate to you. And so that's why. And I think not having those plans has really helped me.
Fantastic to get a bit more insight into WeTransfer as a loyal customer, I would say. And you didn't know any of that, so that's lovely to hear. Dara, you deal with really heavy topics with very light touch. The humour side of you, where does that come from? What does that bring? Is that deliberate or natural?
My mum and dad are very, very different. My dad sadly passed away about 5 years ago, but they're very different characters. And my mum, but the one, they've got many, a lot of kind of characteristics that are similar, but many that are hugely different. And but they were both incredibly loving. And the thing about them it's quite funny. When I was a kid, my mum was very driven. I said she was the breadwinner. Like, she was brought up in Iran, and what was drummed into her, quite rightly, is like, if you're going to succeed as a woman in industry, especially in somewhere like Iran, you probably have to work hard, to stand out, because maybe being a woman will work against you. And her mum was in medicine, was senior, and she was the one drumming that into her. And my dad was very successful in Iran. But when the revolution happened, ostensibly they lose everything, right? But my mum had been educated in the UK and the US, more of a kind of professional route, the academic route to, so she got, as I say, she got the role. My dad came over having basically lost everything, and didn't have a big job. And it was my mum who was, the breadwinner, as I say. And my dad very much looked after me, took me to school. And yeah, he did work. He did do bits and bobs. He had a business with someone else, but it wasn't as consistent. So However, so if you look at it from his point of view, old school, Iranian, his wife's the breadwinner. He's had to leave his friends, his family, go to it. He didn't speak the language. He learnt the language, but he didn't speak the language. He never, ever moaned. Now, actually, that ain't true. Of course he moaned, but it wasn't, he always said he felt lucky and blah, blah, blah. And he was just a beautiful, lovely man. And actually, I always joke that when he died, I did the eulogy or whatever. And I made a joke at that. Maybe eulogy is the wrong time to be making jokes, but it is what it is. So I said I felt very lucky because I got 50% of my mum and 50% of my dad. But I said the real lucky thing is if had I got the other 50% of each, I would have been a nightmare. Because like my dad was really laid back. My mum was quite uptight, like very kind of highly strung. She was super driven. My dad was a bit more kind of like, listen, don't worry, But they're both, relatively smart. But my dad was all about humor and making light of stuff. And if you can't laugh, and, that's really, really helped me. And I think that any instance that you go into a situation and you feel positive or you're laughing or whatever, you're going to find it. But I'm not saying, look, there's obviously times where it's inappropriate to do that. I'm not suggesting. But you talk about, Mark, I think genuinely think that everyone goes through hard stuff, right? Everyone. And it doesn't matter what job you do or what position you're at or whether you're, everyone goes through stuff, and it's how you confront things. And the reason I try to be positive and like laugh, because it helps me. It might not help other people, but it helps me, in times that are uncertain and times that just feel super tough, and surrounding yourself with people who you find inspiring and make you laugh. So humor is a really important aspect.
Dara, that was absolutely brilliant, and I really do think that humor should really feature in a lot of different scenarios, even if just lighten up some moments. And you shared that in spades. I think for me, you've had such a fantastic career to this point, and I just wondered to what extent, even if you were trying to give advice to somebody, to, I guess, either your younger self or somebody who's starting out in their career, what type of advice would you give them?
People should really be proud of what they can and can't, that they can do, and their strengths, and they should really try to hone them. And of course, they should try to work on their weaknesses and get better. But just being that best version of yourself is, the single best, not best bit of advice necessarily, but the thing that resonates most with me. And I think, look, there's another thing, and I mean this, and it kind of, I suppose, it wraps up where we've been. What we've ended up on is, as I say, if you're going to spend 70% of the week for 70% of your life working, wouldn't it be great if you could do it with people you like in an environment that's positive and fun? And I'm not saying that everyone has that luxury, but if you find that, that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. So, and go towards things. And by the way, fun means different things to different people. But if you see that, like, as I said, I had that choice of, there was one people where everyone seemed really happy and the other where everyone seemed far more serious. Some people might really prefer the serious one. Great. Go after that one. Go after don't try to follow what other people tell you is the right thing to follow. They might give you great advice, but ultimately it's up to you. Otherwise, we'd all still trying to be like footballers or, or movie stars or singers, so sometimes there's a lot of amazing stuff out there, but just try to follow what you're interested in.
Just on the football thing, I've got this impression of like 7 or 8 year old boys and girls playing football where they just all follow the ball around in a pack. And then at some point, the epiphany, and they realize actually use the space and explore. Dara, it's been a beautiful conversation today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. Loved your insights. I know it's going to be very helpful to a large number of people who listen in. So thank you again, Dara.
Honestly, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you for asking.